Growing up, I always thought my mom was just really particular about my socks. Every single day, without fail, she'd lay out these bright red socks on my dresser. They weren't even nice socks, just plain cotton ones that she'd buy in bulk from some discount store. When I'd complain or try to wear different ones, she'd get this look in her eyes that I can only describe as pure panic. "It's safer this way," she'd whisper, practically forcing my feet into those red socks before I left for school. I never understood what she meant by safer. Safer from what? They were just socks. As I got older, the ritual became more embarrassing. Other kids would make fun of me for wearing the same color socks every day. I try to hide my feet or wear longer pants to cover them up. But Mom never budged. Red socks, every single day, for 18 years of my life. When I finally moved out for college, I threw away every pair of red socks I owned. It felt like freedom, choosing my own clothes, my own colors, my own life. I wore blue socks, black socks, white socks with stripes. I bought novelty socks with pizza patterns and superhero logos. For the first time in my life, my feet felt like they belonged to me. But Mom would still send me packages. Care packages filled with homemade cookies, hand-knitted scarves, and always, always, a fresh pack of red socks. I'd stuff them in the back of my drawer and forget about them. She'd call and ask if I was wearing them, and I'd lie and say yes. The relief in her voice when I said that always made me feel guilty, but not guilty enough to actually put them on. Years passed. I graduated, got a job, started dating. Life was normal. Mom and I talked less frequently, but when we did, she'd always ask about the socks. "Are you wearing them? Do you need more?" "I have extras." The questions seemed to get more urgent as time went on, but I chalked it up to her getting older and more set in her ways. Last month, Mom got sick. Really sick. The kind of sick where you start going through old photo albums and having conversations about memories. I took time off work to help take care of her, moving back into my childhood bedroom temporarily. Being in that house again brought back so many memories. The smell of her cooking, the way the floorboards creaked in the hallway, and yes, the daily red sock ritual. One afternoon while she was napping, I decided to clean out some of her old drawers to make room for her medications. That's when I found the nightstand drawer that was always locked when I was growing up. She must have forgotten to lock it, or maybe she was too weak to care anymore. Inside, I found things that made my blood run cold. A passport with Mom's photo, but a completely different name. Birth certificates for children I'd never heard of. Medical records with terminology I didn't understand, but somehow knew weren't normal. And then, at the very bottom, a manila folder with my name written on it in Mom's careful handwriting. The folder contained photos of me from every year of my childhood. But these weren't normal family photos. These were clinical shots, front view, side view, measurements written in the margins. Each photo was labeled with a number and the word sample. My baby photo was labeled sample number 7. But the thing that made my hands shake was finding that old missing person flyer from 1999. A grainy photocopy of a newspaper clipping about a missing boy. The boy in the photo looked exactly like me at that age, down to the same cowlick in his hair and the gap between his front teeth. But according to the flyer, this boy had disappeared 3 states away, 2 years before I was supposedly born. The boy in the photo was wearing red socks. My mind started racing, trying to piece together memories that suddenly seemed distorted and wrong. Had I really been born in the hospital Mom always talked about? Why couldn't I remember any relatives or family friends from when I was little? Why did we move so often when I was young, never staying in one place for more than a year or two? And why, in all my childhood photos, was I always wearing those same red socks? Update 1. I confronted Mom the next day when she was feeling a bit stronger. At first, she denied everything, claiming she didn't know what I was talking about. But when I showed her the passport and the photos, something in her face just crumbled. She looked older than I'd ever seen her, fragile and defeated. She didn't give me the whole story at once. It came out in pieces over several days, between her medication schedules and doctor visits. Each revelation was more disturbing than the last. The truth was that I wasn't her biological son. I wasn't anyone's biological son in the traditional sense. I was part of something she called the Project, an experimental program that she'd been involved with in the late 1990s. She'd been young then, desperate for money, working as a lab assistant for a research facility that officially didn't exist. The program was trying to create what they called enhanced humans, people with improved physical and mental capabilities. But their methods were far from ethical. They were using genetic material from missing children, creating multiple versions of the same child to see which combinations would produce the best results. I was number 7. There had been 6 others before me, all based on the same genetic template as the boy from the missing person flyer. Mom never told me what happened to the first 6, but the way she avoided eye contact when I asked made my stomach turn. The red socks weren't just a quirk, they were a tracking system. Each sample in the program was assigned a specific color to make identification easier. Red meant I was the active subject, the one they were monitoring. Mom said there were others in different locations wearing different colors, but she only ever had access to information about me. When the program was shut down suddenly, something about funding being pulled and investigations getting too close, Mom was supposed to turn me over to be disposed of. Instead, she grabbed me and ran. We'd been on the run ever since, constantly moving, constantly looking over our shoulders. The red socks were her way of maintaining the illusion that I was still part of the program, in case anyone ever came looking. If they saw me wearing red, they might assume I was still being monitored and leave us alone. It was a desperate gamble, but it had worked for over 20 years. But now that I knew the truth, Mom was terrified. She kept saying that they might still be watching, that people who knew about the program might come for me if they realized she'd talked. Her fear was infectious. I found myself checking locks twice and jumping at unexpected sounds. The worst part was realizing that everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My birthday, my name, my entire identity, all of it was fabricated. The boy I was supposed to be had been stolen from his real family and turned into a science experiment. And somewhere out there, that boy's real parents might still be wondering what happened to their son. I started having nightmares about the other 6 samples. What did they look like? Had they been like me? Or had the experiments made them different? Were they still alive somewhere? Or had they all been disposed of when they were no longer useful? Update 2. Mom passed away 3 weeks after our conversation. The illness took her quickly once she'd finally let go of the secret she'd been carrying for so long. In her final days, she kept apologizing over and over, saying she'd tried to give me a normal life despite everything. She made me promise to destroy all the documents after she was gone, to forget everything she'd told me and live as if none of it had ever happened. But I couldn't just forget. How do you forget that your entire existence is built on someone else's tragedy? After the funeral, I went back to the house to pack up her belongings. That's when I decided to explore the basement more thoroughly. Mom had always kept it locked, claiming it was just storage for old Christmas decorations and broken furniture. But now I had all her keys, and I needed to know if there were more secrets hidden down there. The basement was exactly what you'd expect from someone trying to hide evidence of a decades-old cover-up. Filing cabinets full of forged documents, boxes of medical supplies that looked like they belonged in a laboratory, and a computer that was so old I wasn't sure it would even turn on. But the most disturbing discovery was in the far corner, behind some old furniture. There was a section of the basement wall that looked different from the rest, newer concrete that had been painted over to match, but not quite successfully. When I tapped on it, it sounded hollow. It took me hours to break through with a sledgehammer I found in Mom's garage. What I found behind that wall made me understand why Mom had been so terrified all these years. There were 6 small rooms carved into the earth behind the basement wall. Each room contained the remains of a child who looked exactly like me. The bodies had been preserved somehow, but I could tell they'd been dead for a long time. Each one was wearing socks of a different color: blue, green, yellow, orange, purple, and black. Samples 1 through 6. In the center of the space, there was a 7th room that was empty except for a small table. On that table was a brand new pair of red socks, still in the package, with a note in Mom's handwriting: "For when it's time." I realized that Mom hadn't just rescued me from the program. She'd been the one eliminating the failed samples all along. She'd brought them home, studied them, and when they didn't meet whatever criteria the program had established, she'd disposed of them herself. The basement had been her private laboratory, and I'd been living above a graveyard my entire life. The 7th room hadn't been for me while I was useful to the program. It had been prepared for when I was no longer needed, or when keeping me alive became too dangerous. The fresh socks were meant to be my burial clothes. But something had changed Mom's mind about me. Maybe I'd developed in a way that made me more valuable than the others. Or maybe she'd simply grown attached after caring for me for so long. Either way, She'd chosen to keep me alive and run rather than complete her assignment. I spent days in that basement, trying to understand the scope of what had happened. There were detailed notes about each sample, tracking their development, their capabilities, their failures. Reading about the other 6 was like reading alternate versions of my own life story. Children who'd grown up in that basement, subjected to tests and experiments, until they were deemed unsuccessful and terminated. Final update. I've been struggling with what to do with this information for months now. Part of me wants to contact the authorities to make sure the people responsible for this program face justice. But Mom destroyed most of the evidence before she died, and the few names I found in her files seemed to lead to dead ends. People who died years ago or identities that never existed in the first place. The other part of me is terrified that reaching out will put me in danger. If there are still people out there who know about the program, coming forward might make me a target. Mom spent 20 years looking over her shoulder for a reason. I've decided to seal up the basement and sell the house. I can't live with the knowledge of what's buried down there, but I also can't bring myself to disturb the remains of the other samples. They deserve better than they got in life, but I don't know how to give them justice without potentially destroying myself in the process. I've also been researching the original missing child case, the boy whose genetic material was used to create all of us. His name was Tommy, and he disappeared from a playground while his mother was talking to another parent. The case went cold after a few months, and his parents eventually moved away. I found recent articles about his mother still holding annual memorial services, still hoping for answers about what happened to her son. I've written her a letter dozens of times, trying to find a way to explain that I might be what's left of her child, but I can never find the right words. How do you tell someone that their missing son was turned into a science experiment, and that you're one of 7 copies made from his DNA? How do you explain that their real child is probably dead, but that pieces of him are still walking around in the world? I've started wearing red socks again. Not because I have to, and not because I'm afraid of what might happen if I don't. I wear them because they're the only connection I have to the other 6 who didn't make it out of that basement. They're my way of remembering that I'm not just myself. I'm also the hopes and dreams of 6 other children who never got the chance to grow up and make their own choices about what color socks to wear. Sometimes I wonder if there are other survivors out there. Other samples from different genetic templates, living normal lives with adoptive parents who rescued them from the program. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever meet someone else who grew up with inexplicable rules and restrictions that suddenly make sense in the context of a secret scientific program. But mostly, I just try to live the life that Mom gave me when she chose to run instead of following her orders. I try to make choices that honor both the boy I am and the boy I was created from. I work a normal job. I have normal relationships. I pay my taxes and vote in elections and complain about traffic just like everyone else. The only difference is that every morning when I put on my red socks, I remember that my existence came at a terrible cost. I remember the 6 children who look exactly like me, but never got to see their 18th birthday. I remember the real Tommy, whose life was stolen to create all of us. And I remember Mom, who spent 2 decades living in fear because she chose love over duty. I don't know if I'll ever find peace with the truth about what I am and where I came from. But I know that I'm alive when others aren't, and that has to mean something. Maybe that's enough for now. Maybe that's all any of us can ask for. The chance to make our own meaning out of the circumstances we didn't choose. I still have nightmares sometimes about that basement, about the 6 empty rooms, and the 7th one that was meant for me. But I also have dreams about the future, about the possibility of finding other survivors, about maybe someday having the courage to contact Tommy's mother, about using what I know to make sure nothing like this ever happens to other children. For now, though, I'm just taking it one day at a time. One pair of red socks at a time. It's not the life I thought I was going to have, but it's the life I've got, and I'm determined to make it count for something.